Well, today we're going to talk about the chessboard of the end times. Now, many years ago, Zbigniew Brzezinski, and when anybody asks, how do you spell that, it's just like it sounds, and wrote a book called The Grand Chessboard, which was really, in some respects, his update of the early geographical work of a guy named Mackinder, who talked about the fact that the northern European plain was where sort of the pivot point of history because of the geographic location of it. But the rimland was also important, and that included the Middle East. And as we know, the Middle East really, both from the Bible and from today's headlines, is very significant. I'm going to talk about that a little bit at the end, but we'll talk a little bit else about some of the things that are converging. What's interesting, somebody sent me this yesterday. The New Scientist has its new publication, its new magazine title is called The End, How Everything Will Eventually End. And what you find is if you read through secular and other religious texts, everybody has an apocalyptic view. Everybody, I think, believes that in some way what the world that we know now is going to come to an end. Now, we know from a Christian standpoint, the scriptures are very clear how that all works out and plays out. But secularists also have apocalyptic views. If you're Al Gore or the president or a lot of people in our that occupy the halls of Congress, they believe it is, man-caused global warming is going to bring an end to everything. Other people have other views. There's an Islamic eschatology that talks about the apocalypse. So I only bring this up is that I see more and more people talking about that these days. Now, the New Scientist may say that it may not be for hundreds of millions to billions of years before all that happens, but this is going to end. And then something else will evolve in its place. This week, there was a stunning human achievement that was done. The longest railway or highway tunnel in the world was open in Switzerland. It's called the Gotthard Tunnel. It, at times, is 3,000 feet under the top of the mountains that it goes under, and it's 35 miles long. It's been under construction for about 12 years. It's cost about $17 billion. But the weird thing, and I don't know how to describe this other than really weird, not weird, but really weird on the scale of, we live in a world where really weird things are happening, right? Okay, this one's really up there, if not at the top of things that I've seen. This shows a picture of some of the people when they were drilling the tunnel and constructing it. And so when they opened it this week, they had a lot of European Union leaders there. This is going to cut the time down from the travel down to Milan, Italy by a significant amount because, as you know, the Alps are very steep mountains and it's hard to get over and around them, and the roads wind around, and this just kind of is a straight shot underneath the mountains. They had a dedication ceremony. Angela Merkel was there, and to say that this dedication ceremony was bizarre is a little bit, a bit of an understatement. Now I'm going to play a video. I don't have any, well, I think there is sound to it, but I think I have it turned way down. And this is the opening ceremony. This is the good part. Okay? The Roboton construction workers, they're okay. And by the way, there was a part that I didn't play. I actually had it in, and Brian said, did you leave that part in with that thing hanging from the ceiling in the tunnel? Did you put duct tape because she was topless? And I didn't realize that, so it's been edited out, so I think I got it all. There are other parts where people are running around half dressed. And, well, just this is the outdoor part of the ceremony. And you see, really, what you have is this occultic eye. And you'll see these beings flying around. You see how it's an eye? And then they come dancing down. And then here comes this goat-like creature. And all the leaders of Europe are sitting there watching this. And then you have really sort of a satanic symbol there in the thing. You had the construction workers flying up, and then they would be sort of blown up and fall down, representing I think 4 people were killed during the construction of 4 or 8 people were killed during the construction of this thing. And this thing goes on for like, one tape I saw of it, the one recording, was 6 hours. And then you see this goat king come out with this queen or something. And it bows down and it says something like, you are the God. It was really weird, okay, because I showed you the good parts that could be shown in a family setting. Now, I want you to know that was a secular occultic worship service. There's no doubt about that. Now, I don't want you to confuse that with what goes on in some churches these days, although it's very easy to do. There was a women's conference a week or so ago at Hillsong, New York. Now, I have recounted some of the issues with the Hillsong network of churches over time, particularly New York City, where they had a gay couple serving in their choir, actually participating in the worship leadership part of the worship program there. The pastor, Carl Lentz, has refused to speak out on homosexuality because Jesus never talked about it. And he's been very fuzzy. And every time Hillsong gets caught, what they do is they issue a statement saying, well, we didn't really plan it that way. Somebody made a mistake, and we've dealt with it, and it won't happen again. And it never does happen again until the next time it happens. And so this is the women's conference. And in New York City, there's a guy of some note. He runs around in his underwear with a guitar and a cowboy hat on, no shirt, and he's called the Naked Cowboy, and he sings and tourists give him money. And in this thing, you see a picture here. Now, that's photoshopped a little bit to cover up. That's actually the youth pastor of Hillsong, New York, who came out dressed as the Naked Cowboy at the end of this women's conference, which was led by Bobby Houston, Brian Houston's wife, who's head of the whole Hillsong network of churches. Here's a little video of the end. And Brian says, well, this wasn't planned. The guy came out there, nobody knew he was going to do this. They had Spider-Man, of course. And then this is really weird. Here comes Lady Liberty holding the torch, dressed kind of like Jesus, but it's a bearded man playing Lady Liberty. And I just want to know is what's up with that? Well, somebody said transgender, and that seems to be. And so I guess on the scale of weirdness, where would you rank Hillsong relative to the European Union tunnel opening ceremony? I really don't find that either one of them are acceptable. Now, as I said, you can go see Brian Hillsong's latest apology, non-apology, but promise that it'll never happen again, and the situation's being dealt with. And they'll have this conference again. It's called the Colors Conference, and they're going to have about 8 or 9 of them around the world next year. And it's why, huge attendance. Thousands of women went to this thing. In 2 Timothy chapter 3, it says this: "This know also, that in the last days perilous times shall come. For men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affection, truce breakers, false accusers, incontinent, fierce, despisers of those that are good, traitors, heady, high-minded, lovers of pleasures more than lovers of God, having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof. From such turn away. For of this sort are they which creep into houses, lead captive silly women laden with sins, led away with divers lusts. Verse 7, ever learning and never able to come to the knowledge of the truth. Now as Jannes and Jambres withstood Moses, so do these also resist the truth. Men of corrupt minds reprobate concerning the faith. I would recommend that you listen, well, you should listen to the whole show. Jan Markell had Amir Sarfati on yesterday, and the last segment was a discussion with Eric Barger and Jill Martin Rishi and Larry, the producer of the show there, and Jan, about one of the things they hear the most is people write to them and say, we can't find a church. And I get those emails all the time from people, messages on Facebook. They come to my email, they come to the church email. Where can I find a church? And a lot of times I don't know, because I don't know every geographic region of the country. And a lot of times, even if I contact people that I know in that area, they're like, I don't have any place to go to church either. I watch somebody online, whether it's Fellowship Bible Chapel or somebody else. So I would recommend that you listen to that, because listen, this is a common thing for the faithful remnant to feel these days, like the rest of the world is absolutely going insane. And you wonder if you're still in touch with reality because the stuff bothers you and everybody else is running around like it doesn't. And I was interviewed this week for Jan's show. I think it'll be on this Saturday. And so you can listen to that. We talked a little bit about that, but that's the way it is. This is really, it does seem like it's out of control. Here's yet another Christian music artist who has come out and announced he's leaving his wife and 2 children, and he's gay, and he says, Trey Pearson, I don't know who he is, but supposedly he sold a couple 100,000 albums. There is absolutely no conflict with accepting who I am and following Jesus. Do you see 2 Timothy chapter 3 in operation right in front of your eyes? In the last days, perilous times will come. We live in perilous times. This is a conference coming up in Irvine, California at the end of the month by the Evangelical Network. This is the group I believe was started by Matthew Vines and some others to promote the LGBTQIANB plus question mark, whatever, all the letters they use these days to describe that. And here's one of the main speakers. Announcement, Tony Campolo to be keynote speaker for the Evangelical Network Conference in Irvine, June 30th to July 3rd. Meet Tony along with other LGBT supportive speakers. Register today. This is people who claim to be evangelical. We could recount for you the seeming inability of the United Methodist Church to deal with that problem, that sin problem in their midst. I heard Bob Burney on local radio talking about the fact that the local bishop doesn't really want to take a stand on it because it might be divisive. Well, listen, the truth divides. It's a problem when you don't stand for the truth of the Word of God when it's crystal clear. And Tony Campolo was very popular, still is very popular in evangelical circles. And for a lot of years he said, I don't accept that. My wife does, but I'm opposed to same-sex marriage. And then a year or two ago, guess what? He caved also. And it was around the time that his son, who had been a leader in the emergent church, or emerging church, if you want to call it that, Bart Campolo, had left the emergent church movement, went to the University of Southern California, and became the atheist chaplain. I'm sure that he can live with that cognizance. He announced he was an atheist, no longer believed in God. and he would serve as a campus chaplain in some fashion at the University of Southern California. This transgender thing, though, we talk a lot about it on Jan's show, so I won't go into a lot of those details again. But here is a congressional hearing. In it, they had a lady who had, you'll see when this congresswoman from California, I think her name is Lofgren or something, she comes down pretty hard on the lady who said, if this transgender thing is just based on feelings, it's not based on physical facts or science. Listen to what she says.
Now, but I'll just say this. I don't usually call out witnesses, but here's what the written testimony says. And this is Mrs. Harriet. We are teaching young people a terrible lesson. If I believe that I am a Russian princess, that doesn't make me a Russian princess, even if my friends and acquaintances are willing to indulge my fantasy. Nor am I a great horned owl just because, as I have been told, I happen to share some personality traits with those feathered creatures. I've got to say, I found this rather offensive. And it says to me that the witness really doesn't know anything and probably has never met a transgender child who is going through, in almost every case, a very difficult experience finding themselves. And I believe that the department's guidance will help schools all over the United States in preventing the kind of violence and harassment that these transgender kids find too often. So that's all I'm going to say on that. I think it's very regrettable that that comment was put into the record, and I think it's highly offensive. Now, I'd like to ask you a question, Mr. Knopf.
Well, could I comment on that, please?
No, it's just my opinion.
I think you'll find that many people find it very offensive that the Department of Education
I think you're a bigot,
that
lady.
they can be
I think you're an ignorant
schools
bigot.
all across the country.
I think you are an ignorant bigot and anti.
Gentlelady from California will suspend. You're out of order.
She's out of
We don't
order.
call
It's my
names
time,
in this
Mr.
committee,
Chairman.
and you'll not be recognized to do that.
Mr. Chairman, it is my time. And I would just like to say that we allow witnesses to say offensive things, but I cannot allow that kind of bigotry to go into the record unchallenged. Now, I don't want to get into a debate about
Does
it.
that mean you think I am a Russian princess?
I have no idea.
Now, the guy behind her is like, I can't believe she's so, he's probably having heart. Listen, that's the bigot. That's the person you need to be afraid of, is a congressperson that doesn't think, runs totally with feelings and is not rational at all. In New York City, they have enacted a transgender code. And on the page, there's one page here, it has cisgender, gender identity. These are definitions that they have. This thing goes on for like 15 pages. Gender expression, gender nonconforming, intersex, sex, transgender, all these terms are defined, and then you have certain obligations as somebody who might have public accommodations, and so they show examples of violations that would occur. Intentional or repeated refusal, see number A or letter A. Intentional or repeated refusal to use an individual's preferred name, pronoun, or title. For example, repeatedly calling a transgender woman him or Mr. after she has made clear which pronouns and titles she uses. She's not a she. She's a he by scientific definition. Refusal to use an individual's preferred name, pronoun, or title because they do not conform to gender stereotypes. For example, calling a woman Mr. because her appearance is aligned with traditional gender-based stereotypes of masculinity. How do you know how to act? You know what this is designed to? It's designed to chill response. You won't say anything because you're afraid of getting written up for a violation, a code violation. That's what it's designed to do. It's designed to shut down. You saw the lady. I don't want to debate this. They don't want to debate it. The time for the debate is over. That's what they say on global warming. Here's the president this week citing scripture to defend his school bathrooms rule. Love your neighbor. To which somebody responded in the comments, hey, Mr. President, the golden rule has nothing to do with bathroom use. These culture wars continue to go on in Congress over this transgender issue and the LGBTQ agenda. And to be honest with you, there's a significant number of the Republicans in Congress, in the House, that don't support traditional values on this anymore. It's not it's not supported by the majority in Congress. I think that's pretty clear from what we see. So you just need to learn how to deal with it. It's what's going to happen. I don't have pictures of some of the things that have been going on at Donald Trump rallies, people being attacked, sucker punched. You can see the videos online. Here's one writer for, can't remember the magazine, Emmett Renson, advice. If Trump comes to your town, start a riot. And I posted this on my Facebook page yesterday, my Facebook wall. What's the over-under when somebody's going to get killed at one of these things? Because we're still 5 months from the election. And I'm sort of like somebody said, some of the parks are even, some of the monuments and parks are even reacting what they see going on in America. This is an artist's rendition of Mount Rushmore. In the EU, back in March, the EU Ministers for Justice and Home Affairs and EU institutions issued a report on the Brussels terrorist attacks. Buried in that lengthy report as to what happened and things that they might do to remedy the situation was a statement that said, by June of 2016, we will issue regulations regarding hate speech. Well, guess what? This week, they came out with and reported in a number of places that Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Microsoft had entered into an agreement with the European Union to monitor hate speech online and an agreement to take it down. Here's the press release that announced it, and take down that hate speech within 24 hours. And then here's the regulations that did it. And hate is something that promotes sort of a negative view of someone's race, religion. I don't know if they put sex in there or not, but that's coming, okay? That'll be part of it. And listen, Facebook, and I had somebody say this to me, well, that's Europe. We live in America. But you need to understand that fascism operates on a number of levels. It operates on a government level and operates on a corporate level. And look what corporations are doing to shut down the debate on these issues. And so that's a concern of mine, that these corporations, and listen, it was not 2 weeks ago that Mark Zuckerberg, the head of Facebook, had a meeting with conservatives who were concerned about Facebook taking down conservative Facebook pages, either groups or people who expressed what are considered to be conservative views or speaking out against the problem of Islam in the world. And Zuckerberg said, we'll work on it, we're going to be fine. And 2 weeks later, he signed this thing with the European Union. And even a secular newspaper, in fact, I think it was the Los Angeles Times, deal with EU here, the headline on the left from the Los Angeles Times on June 1st. Deal with EU has Facebook, others in propaganda war against the Islamic State. And they said, Facebook is now a propaganda arm of the government. And it is. And so we need to realize that and understand that. But listen, the whole reason that this has come up again is to chill people from speaking out on these issues that are not politically correct or speaking on them in a way that's not politically correct. Where it ends, I don't know. We still do have free speech in this country, but Facebook is a private company, and they're allowed to do what they want. And if they want to restrict things on their site, they're allowed to do that. Now, the government can't, and because the government can't, so what does the government do? They go to the big corporations to do it. And the fact that it's an EU rule doesn't make any difference, my friends, because Facebook's not going to apply different rules for the European Union people that use Facebook and people that use Facebook in other parts of the world. It's going to be whatever the most restrictive rule is that runs. And in fact, there's a lady in Sweden, I can't remember her name, she's the Swedish writer for Gatestone Institute, an organization that I recommend that you look at their website, gatestoneinstitute.org. And she had put up a video, very well done video, on her Facebook page about, or linked to it on her Facebook page, about this town in Sweden that's been destroyed by the immigrants that have come from the Middle East. And people are afraid to go out. The whole town it's not what it was a year ago. It's done. People don't want to live there. It's not safe. Facebook deleted her page within, certainly not hours after this thing was entered into. Took it down completely. Now, Gatestone complained and Facebook did put it back up. But it's going to happen over and over and over again. So just be aware of that. Okay, now I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about a couple columns of Caroline Glick that I think put in perspective the grand chessboard of the Middle East and the things that are going on vis-a-vis Israel and the push for peace and the rise of Iran. So I'm going to read extensively from her columns just because I think they're so good, but I'm going to try to put them in perspective of the events of this week. So the column she had on Tuesday was the old general's old plan. I'll talk about that in a moment, but to put it in a little bit of context, on Tuesday, Prime Minister, actually, is that got sound with it?
I take this opportunity to make clear that I remain committed to making peace with the Palestinians and with all our neighbors. The Arab Peace Initiative includes positive elements that can help revive constructive negotiations with the Palestinians. We are willing to negotiate with the Arab states revisions to that initiative so that it reflects the dramatic changes in the region since 2002, but maintains the agreed goal of 2 states for 2 peoples. To this end, we welcome the recent speech by Egyptian President Assisi and his offer to help advance peace and security in the region.
Now, the Jerusalem Post in its front page article on Monday said this was a surprise move by Netanyahu to come out and say he supported the Arab Peace Initiative, and he made this announcement at the swearing-in ceremony for Lieberman, the new defense minister in Israel. Now, I suspect that part of this is politics that's going on here. I don't know that he's going to, Prime Minister Netanyahu will back off on his prior requirements that a condition of negotiations is that the Palestinians agree to recognize the permanency of the Jewish state of Israel, which they have never recognized, they've never stated, and they might dupe some people into believing that they actually think that it's a possibility. But suffice it to say, this was kind of surprising, and Netanyahu's having a lot of trouble with his coalition. In Israel, they have 120 members in the Knesset, the parliament. They're a parliamentary government. You have to be the prime minister, you have to put together a coalition of a majority. Currently, Netanyahu and the Likud party has 61 out of 120 votes. That's one more than half, which means that he has a very thin, you could call it a razor-thin margin. Naftali Bennett of the Home Party, the Settler Home Party, I can't remember the exact name of it, it escapes me for the moment, has come out and said, listen, if you're going to do a 2-state solution, we're pulling out of the coalition, and that's 5 or 6 Knesset members. That would collapse the coalition, and unless Netanyahu could get somebody immediately to step in and support his government that had at least that many votes, or from a couple, and there's all kinds of different groups that have members of the Knesset, they would have new elections. And there's no guarantee that he would win the next election. So, while a lot of us respect Prime Minister Netanyahu and the stands that he takes, you need to understand that his coalition, his ability to remain Prime Minister is razor thin at best. And if Naftali Bennett pulls his party out, they got to get somebody in. Now, the Zionist Union Party, headed by a guy named Herzog, which is kind of a center-left party, has said, well, we're not coming into the coalition as long as Naftali Bennett's party is there. So they may come in and shore up the coalition to allow Netanyahu to remain. It's very complicated. If you think American politics are complicated, Israeli politics are even more so. So back to Caroline Glick's article. So what she was talking about, and you'll see she's talking about what the old Israeli generals are doing. Every time somebody there's this peace initiative, Netanyahu says, I support it, everybody's pushing for it. I'll talk in a minute about the meeting that took place in Paris with 20 foreign ministers from around the world, but not the Palestinians or the Israel. So let's look at what Caroline Glick has to say, and we'll put the link in the notes, although you're going to get most of the article anyway. The Israeli left is a one-trick pony. As it sees things, all of Israel's problems with the Palestinians, with the Arab world, with Europe, and with the American left can be solved by giving up Judea and Samaria, half of Jerusalem, along with Gaza, which we gave up already. Once Israel does this, the left insists, then the Palestinians, the Arab world, Europe, and Bernie Sanders voters will love us as they've never loved us before. The events of the past quarter century have shown the left's position to be entirely wrong. And by the way, you may assume that I agree with everything that she has to say in this column and the next one that I'm going to read. Every time Israel has given the Palestinians land, it has become less secure. Remember what happened in Gaza in 2005. They gave Gaza back. Palestinians went in, and what did they do? They destroyed everything left behind. They left behind great farms, greenhouses, irrigation systems. What did the Palestinians do? They destroyed it. And did the Palestinians say, oh, thank you, we're glad we have Gaza, now let's work on the rest of this? What did they do? No, they always start something like a mini intifada or something like that whenever Israel capitulates to them. The Arabs have become more hostile. The West has become more hostile. The Palestinians have expanded their demands. Given the failure of its plan, the left could have been expected to abandon it and strike out on a different course, but it didn't. Instead, it has tried to hide its continued allegiance to its failed withdrawal strategy by pretending it is something else. A central component of the left's concealment strategy is its use of former generals from the Israeli Defense Force and Air Force. Every couple of years, a new initiative of former generals, often funded by the EU, is published. Each in turn uses whatever the popular memes of the day may be to repackage their call for withdrawal from Judea and Samaria. In the world, they call that the West Bank, and the partition of Jerusalem. The media, itself dominated by the left, backs these initiatives. The retired war heroes are paraded before the cameras, presented to the public as responsible adults who have grudgingly entered the political fray, despite their aversion to it because of their patriotism. They're props that they trot out. Just as they heeded the call of duty and led forces in wars of earlier generations, so today we are told they heed the call again in yet another last-ditch effort to save the country. Just in time for Avigdor Lieberman's swearing in as defense minister, a new group of old generals released a new version of their old discredited plan. A group calling itself Commanders for Israeli Security has mobilized an impressive roster of 214 generals that have signed on to a new position paper called Security First, Changing the Rules of the Game, a plan to improve Israel's security diplomatic position. And you can go to their website at securityfirst.co.il and read the plan that they've come out with. It was released recently. I think it was released just earlier this week. Caroline then continues to opine on the plan. Unfortunately, like every leftist plan to date, if the generals get their way and the government takes their advice, the results will be precisely the opposite of what they promise. As has been the case with every other well-packaged withdrawal plan, Israel's security will be harmed. Our international position will be wrecked. Bernie Sanders voters, along with the Europeans, will expand their devotion to bashing Israel. And the Sunni Arab states that now flock to us will again abandon us. They call for the government to formally relinquish, this is the old generals, they call for the government to formally relinquish Israel's sovereign rights over the vast majority of Judea and Samaria and eastern Jerusalem. They call for the government to permanently stop respecting the property rights of Jews in the areas of Judea and Samaria outside of the security perimeter. The more than 100,000 Jews who live in those areas, they insist, must be denied all right to property save the right to sell whatever they now own. And you'll see there's a couple maps here that they put in on the left. It's divided down into area A, B, and C. The white area within the border of the West Bank, the map on the left, is area C. That is the area that most people acknowledge that Israel is going to have control of if they're going to be a secure mini state, because they're going to shrink back to a state that is somewhat small, somewhat like it was before the 1967 war. Now, do the Palestinians agree with that? No, they don't. They want all of that all the way over to the Jordan River. If you've been there geographically, you can't do it. We happened to be there, I think it was within a week or so after Israel turned over control of Jericho in 1995 to the Palestinians. In fact, the Israeli armed forces person in charge at that time of that area was Amir Sarfati. Didn't get to meet him at that time. It was 20 years later that I finally got to meet the guy. But suffice it to say that these are the areas that are going to do. So Caroline continues. They must not be allowed to build anything. That's the Jews. No new houses, no communities, no new infrastructure. Now think about this. Nobody in any peace plan from Netanyahu's government or any other government has said that the Palestinian, it's kind of redundant, but people who claim to be Palestinians, the Arabs there that live within the confines of current, what was pre-1967 Israel, have to leave. But all Jews have to leave Judea and Samaria. And the world thinks this is fine. Again, this is this insanity that we see going on. And look, this is what happens when you have reprobate minds. People they can't reason anymore. As for the communities, Caroline says, inside the perimeter, the generals insist that those should be permitted to continue respecting Jewish property rights within limits, albeit. For instance, those communities must not be permitted to expand beyond their current construction boundaries. In other words, Jews can build up, but not out. Jerusalem, which they believe should never have been unified in 1967, should be effectively partitioned. Now listen, these are Israeli generals, 214 of them, and their statement says we don't think Israel should have been, or Jerusalem should have been partitioned after the 67 war. By the way, 49 years ago, right now, they were having a war in Israel. A stunning, miraculous victory on the part of the Israeli forces. They defeated all of the Arab armies. 6 days, they wiped them out. They probably could have marched to Cairo if they wanted, but they decided not to. The generals call for the municipal government to stop administering the city as a unified mixed Jewish and Arab city. Instead, they say the city should set up a separate governing authority for Arab neighborhoods in eastern, northern, and southern Jerusalem. And here's the part about Jerusalem. A ticking bomb or a ray of hope is how they title it. There's a map there on the right that shows how it should be partitioned, the blue and yellow areas, and you can look at the legend on the map when you have a little bit more time. And here's what they say. Look at this thing at the bottom. Well, the middle paragraph. The key to restoring calm and preventing such an outbreak lies in the immediate adoption of a plan of action combining steps to enhance personal security in all areas under the city's municipal jurisdiction, including the Palestinians' neighborhood, with a significant improvement in the socioeconomic condition of the city's Palestinian residents, thereby replacing despair with hope for a better future. They bought in to the lies of the left, that this is all based on socioeconomic factors. And it's not. We know that there's an ideological base behind it, but our government won't talk about it. And the Israeli generals, who should know better because they had to deal with it all those years, they should know about it too. A hasty and unnecessary annexation. Listen to this. 49 years ago, in 1967, Israel annexed the Palestinian neighborhoods and villages surrounding Jerusalem in the city's municipal jurisdiction, despite the fact that they had not previously been part of the city. This hasty and coercive move was an error of historic proportions. Today, some 320,000 Palestinians live in areas annexed to the city by Israel. They possess Israeli residence cards and guaranteed rights under Israeli law. And this is an editorial page from, I think, today's Jerusalem Post. When a divided Jerusalem became whole. This is a video. There's no sound of this, guys. So this is what happened during the 1967 war, 49 years ago. Israel, you see the troops here, they're entering in through the Lion Gate into the old city. Jerusalem, the Jews in Jerusalem had for a couple of decades, effectively, been denied access to the Wailing Wall where they wanted to go to pray. The Jordanians used it as a dump, a refuse dump. It was cordoned off from the Jewish quarter of the old city where the Jews still were. There was tremendous damage in the Jewish quarter. If you go to the Jewish quarter today, you will see a lot of new buildings in the Jewish quarter because a lot of things were destroyed between 1948 and up through the 1967 war. But here you see these Israeli soldiers, some of them secular, going to the Wailing Wall for the first time in their lives. They're young kids. They've never been there before. One of the guys that was narrating this or being interviewed for this video said, one man came up to me, he said, I've never prayed before, what do I say? And he says, say Shema Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And here you see a great sort of like equivalent to our Iwo Jima, the Israeli soldiers raising the flag over the unified city of Jerusalem for the first time in 2,000 years, in our lifetimes. A very significant development. Here's some home movies that some of the guys took as they got up onto the Temple Mount. It's a stunning, stunning story. We could talk a long time about some of the miraculous things that occurred during the 67 war. Here you see how they had the Wailing Wall cordoned off. It wasn't a great plaza like it is today. And the joy of these guys who for the first time were able to be there. But there was a problem because there was, what are we going to do? And they decided to give the holy sites, the Temple Mount, back to the Jordanians to administer. And we still have the problem 49 years later today, still a problem. Caroline continues, that separate authority that the generals propose should be responsible for all planning and zoning activities in the Arab neighborhoods as well as the education system and every other aspect of the daily lives of the Arabs of the city. The generals insist that by taking these steps, Israel will prove its devotion to peace and keep the dream of a Palestinian state alive. As a consequence, they say, the Palestinians will be happy and stop trying to murder Israelis. The Arab world will line up to sign peace treaties with Israel. Europe, along with Bernie Sanders voters, I think she's kind of annoyed by Bernie Sanders voters, and that's very understandable, will bury the hatchet and embrace Israel. The problem with the general's newest plan and the ones it replaces is that they all ignore basic facts. There is no Palestinian constituency for peace with Israel. The more Israel offers the Palestinians, the less interested they are in settling. If Israel announces its intentions to leave Judea and Samaria, which the Arabs know will become a Hamas enclave faster than Gaza did, the Arab faith in Israel's power will diminish. As a consequence, if Israel follows the general's advice, our relations with the Sunnis will worsen, not improve. Absolutely right on this. It is a tragedy for Israel that the generals have allowed the left to use them in this way. Their role in perpetuating Israel's destructive and adherence to the devastating two-state policy model diminishes their past contributions and endangers Israel's future. But despite those facts, which I agree with 100%, there is tremendous push for Israel to normalize relations. For example, you see here an article in the Jerusalem Post the other day that they're trying to normalize relations with Turkey ever since they had the Gaza, the boat that got boarded during the breaking the Gaza blockade. Things have been tense with Turkey, but they're trying to make peace with Turkey. Shakid, she's a very conservative member of the Knesset, says that Israel is the tip of the spear in the world's war on terrorism. She's exactly right. They are, as we've said, the canary in the coal mine. So the Prime Minister said this on Monday. By the end of the week, there was a meeting of 20 foreign ministers. You can see them here. You have the EU foreign policy. I can never get her name right, so I won't try. She's there, third from the right and in the first row next to John Kerry. And the French foreign minister, all these were there to try to talk about a two-state solution. And they issued, so there were a lot of people really excited this week. Oh, there's going to be peace. This is the covenant of Daniel 9:27. This means the 70th week is beginning. And I would just urge you to kind of tamp down the hype a little bit. When it happens, we'll be able to tell a little bit better. There's a lot of people the point is there's a lot of people trying to push for peace. And there's a lot of different peace proposals out there from the Arabs, from the Quartet, from the EU, from the UN. So which one of these, I don't know. There's the existing Oslo Accords, which may be revived. I don't know. So just calm down. It'll happen when it's ready to happen. Jordan came out just this morning and said that this impasse in talks is a threat to the region and the world. So the secular governments of the world say this is sort of like the main problem in the world. Now listen, this is exactly what the Bible says would happen in the end times, that Jerusalem would be a burdensome stone for a few people in the world, a few surrounding, all peoples. And usually when the Bible says all peoples, it means all peoples. Pretty clear. It's easy to understand. The French foreign minister came out and said, there's an impending disaster if this deadlock is not broken. It will be world war. What the Bible said would happen in the end times. Little tiny Israel. The Saudis came out this morning and said, our peace plan that we came out with in 2002, that's the best one. So this morning, Netanyahu and some of the people in the Israeli government said, listen, this initiative could harm the regional peace efforts. We'll negotiate directly with the Palestinians, but the Palestinians don't want that. They want to do an end run and come around through the back door. So we'll just have to see what happens. Now, Caroline has an article this morning, and I'll close with this. Iran's chessboard. This region of the Middle East, and I've said this before, it seems that our government over there is playing checkers, and the Persians, the Iranians, are playing chess. And if you know anything about chess versus checkers, checkers have limited moves for their pieces, but there's some pretty fantastic moves that certain chess pieces can make. And so Caroline picked up on this theme and wrote what I think is a really great article that everybody should read. And I'll pretty much read the whole thing to you as we close here today. But this is this volatile region of the world. And when you look through the list of countries in a prophetic passage like Ezekiel 38 and 39, you'll see that there are a number of countries mentioned. Meshach, Tubal, Rosh, and there's a fair amount of controversy about, okay, which country is Meshach, which country is Tubal, which is Rosh, and that type of thing. And there are several different theories that people put forth as to this and that. Probably the most predominant theory is that Meshach, Rosh is Russia, is the leader of the coalition that comes down. But the one that there's no controversy about is Persia. We know where Persia was when Ezekiel wrote. We know where Persia is today. It's pretty much the same place. So that one is a lock. Okay, that's one you can take to the bank. This is one of the main players in the end time. And Caroline picks up on this in a very wise article. So she says that strategic thinking has always been Israel's Achilles heel. As a small state bereft of regional ambitions, so long as regional realities remain more or less static, Israel had little reason to be concerned about the great game of the Middle East. But the ground is shifting in the lands around us. The Arab state system, which ensured the strategic status quo for decades, has collapsed. So for the first time in 4 generations, strategy is again the dominant force shaping events that will impact Israel for generations to come. But while we're all, and again, take Caroline's comments and put them in the context of what we know about Bible prophecy. This, essentially what she's saying is, the way things are lining up is unprecedented. We've never seen it before. What's going to happen? What we thought since the rebirth of the nation of Israel and the beginnings of that 100 years ago, or a little over 100 years ago, as the Jews returned to the land and bought property and that sort of thing, there was an Arab system in place, the Ottoman Empire at that time, later Arab states, and things were relatively stable. There were little wars every now and then. But she says this, but while we were well aware of the efforts Iran is making along our borders and even within them to threaten Israel, we have not connected these efforts to Iran's actions in Iraq and Syria. Only when we connect Iran's actions here with its actions in those theaters do we understand what is now happening and how it will influence Israel's long-term strategic environment. The big question today is what will replace the Arab state system? Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, Yemen, and Libya no longer exist. You'll still see them on maps, but they're not countries anymore. On their detritus, we will see the fight whose results will likely determine the fates of the surviving Arab states, as well as much of Europe and the rest of the world. Israel's strategic environment will be determined in great part by the results of Iran's actions in Iraq and Syria. While Israel can do little to affect the shape of events in these areas, it must understand what they mean for us. Only by doing so will we be able to develop the tools to secure our future in this new strategic arena. Until 2003, Saddam Hussein was the chief obstacle to Iran's rise as the regional hegemon. U.S. forces in Iraq replaced Hussein until they left the country in 2011. In the meantime, by installing a Shiite government in Baghdad, the U.S. set the conditions for the rise of the Islamic State in the Sunni heartland of Anbar province on the one hand, and for Iran's control over Iraq's Shiite-controlled government and armed forces on the others. This is very good analysis. Today, ISIS is the only thing checking Iran's westward advance. Ironically, the monstrous group also facilitates it. ISIS is so demonic that Americans and other Westerners empowering Iranian-controlled forces that fight ISIS seems a small price to pay to rid the world of the fanatical scourge. So ISIS is really bad. So we'll go in there and we'll weaken ISIS with bomb strikes and everything else. And what does that do? Softens them up so that Iran can come marching through and take control of Iraq. All the way over to Syria. They're already there. And then she cites this article in Liberty Underground by a former analyst in our government, J.E. Dyer. And J.E. Dyer has a great article. She has a map. And one of the things she notes in this article is that Iran now has actually opened an actual base within the old borders of Iraq, in northern Iraq. Now, why would they do that? Well, look at the route over to Israel. You don't want to go straight across that desert. When Abram, before he was Abraham, when he went from Ur of the Chaldees to Canaan, how did he go? He went up and around. Why? Because that desert is a killer. And he went up the Euphrates River into Turkey there, what's now southern Turkey, and then came down into the whole to Canaan from the north. But now Iran is establishing a base in northern Iraq, and it will be a base of operations. Dyer says this: meanwhile, Iran is dominating the Iraqi attempt to retake Fallujah from ISIS, with Qasem Soleimani, head of the paramilitary Quds Force, that's one of the parts of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, reported to be on scene, coordinating the fight there. I've written before about the import of this. This is just from a little over a week ago. The more the Iranians consolidate a military presence in the Euphrates corridor using the excuse of beating back ISIS, the closer they are to dominating Anbar province and forging a path from Baghdad to the Jordan River. The second map shows the Anbar Gateway. That's the map I showed you. Mentally, add an Iranian beachhead up in Sulaymaniyah, and you can see how Iran is oozing into Iraq and taking effective control of territory. Note, the caption here is from prior use of the map and other posts and can't be changed without affecting them. Don't be confused by it. And Israel just can't still for that, nor do Jordan, the Saudis, or Egypt want to sit still for it. The only thing that surprises me is a little how quickly this shift has emerged in concrete material terms since its outlines became clear a year ago. Iran is moving, by Iranian standards, very fast, and the mullahs trying to get as much done as they can while Obama is still in office? The region badly needs, they invented chess, right? The region badly needs the conventional pre-2009 use of American power. But that isn't going to happen. Up in Erbil and embedded with the Kurds are bad places for our troops to be right now. Even if the inherent resolve commander can thread the needle and avoid a catastrophe in this crazy quilt battle space, the face of the region is already changing in ways that can't be unchanged without major bloodshed. I do want to say that I find this to be prophetically significant. Very, 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 very prophetically significant as these things line up. Because we have Russia still occupying territory on the north of Israel. Now we have Iran on the march, effectively. And so there's a battle in Fallujah, and they're saying this is a catastrophe unfolding. The Iraqi army is terrible. There are 50,000 people at very severe humanitarian risk of dying. ISIS is in control of Fallujah. They're cut off from water and food. And it's the beginning of summer season when it's very, very warm over there. And this is a humanitarian disaster in place. ISIS is also, at the same time, they're kind of causing problems in Fallujah. They're actually pushing into the northern part of what was Syria, up and towards Turkey and the Kurdish areas at the same time. At the same time, we have a humanitarian crisis. There were over 1,000 immigrants from Hillary Clinton's Libya that passed away that drowned just in the last week. Over 1,000, boats capsized. Mediterranean crossing and boats of that kind is not very easy, and people are dying. In Syria, Caroline says, Iran already controls wide swaths of the country directly, and through its surrogates, the Syrian army, Hezbollah, and Shiite militias, it is fielded in the country. Since the start of the war in Syria, Israel has repeatedly taken action to block those forces from gaining and holding control over the border zone on the Golan Heights. Prime Minister Netanyahu's surprising recent announcement that Israel will never relinquish control over the Golan came in response to his concern that in exchange for a ceasefire in Syria, the U.S. would place that control on the international diplomatic chopping block. A week and a half ago, Iran began its move on Anbar Province. On May 22nd, Iraqi forces trained by the U.S. military led Iraq's offensive to wrest control over Fallujah and Mosul from ISIS, which has controlled the Sunni city since 2014. Despite the fact that the lead forces are U.S. trained, the main forces involved in the offensive are trained, equipped, and directed by Iran, Persia. As Iraqi forces surrounded Fallujah in the weeks before the offensive began, Qasem Soleimani, the commander of the Revolutionary Guard's Quds forces, paid a public visit to the troops that demonstrates Iran's dominant role. The battle for Fallujah is a clear indication that Iran, rather than the U.S., is calling the shots in Iraq. According to media reports, the Pentagon wanted and expected for the forces to be concentrated in Mosul. But at the last minute, due to Soleimani's intervention, the Iraqi government decided to make Fallujah the offensive center of gravity. The Americans had no choice but to go along with the Iranian plan, as Dyer noted. Iran is increasingly outflanking the U.S. in Iraq. If things follow their current course in the near future, Iran is liable to be in a position to force the U.S. to choose between going to war or ceasing all air operations in Iraq. They're putting in Russian missile systems. So this is effectively cut off. Israel's not going to go bomb the Iranian nuclear facilities. We're not even going to go bomb the Iranian nuclear facilities. To date, commentators have more or less agreed that U.S. operations in Iraq and Syria make no sense. They're significant enough to endanger U.S. forces, but they aren't significant enough to determine the outcome of the war in either territory. But, and this is the point I want you to remember, there may be logic to this seemingly irrational deployment that is concealed from view. A close reading of David Samuel's profile of Obama's Deputy National Security Advisor, Ben Rhodes, published last month in the New York Times, points to such a conclusion. We talked about that. Remember how he said he'd been faking out these young reporters? He was a fiction writer before. Now he's writing the president's speeches, and he's really one of the main foreign policy people. He has no military or foreign policy experience. He was a fiction writer, but I think his brother or somebody is like president of CBS News or something like that. So he's running foreign policy, and he admitted in that article, I deceived everybody. Samuels described Rhodes as second only to Obama in his influence over U.S. foreign and defense policy. Rhodes boasted to Samuels that Obama's moves towards Iran were determined by a strategic course he embraced before he entered office. Now, where did he get this? A fiction writer by training, Rhodes' first national security job was as the chief note-taker for the Iraq Study Group. Then President George W. Bush appointed the group. It was headed up jointly chaired by former Secretary of State James Baker, who really, let's be honest, has never been a friend of Israel, and former Congressman Lee Hamilton from Indiana in 2006 to advise him on how to extricate the U.S. from the war in Iraq. And here's the Iraq Study Group thing. They have certain conclusions that they make. Now, this was the Iraq Study Group. How do we get out of Iraq? Okay? But look at one of the things that they say here on the first page. The United States cannot achieve its goals in the Middle East unless it deals directly with the Arab-Israeli conflict and regional instability. So they're pulling it, what are they doing? They're putting it all back to the two-state solution. Here's another thing in the report, and it says this. It is Recommendation 16. In exchange for these actions and in the context of a full and secure peace agreement, the Israelis should return the goal. This is our government 10 years ago. The Israelis should return the Golan Heights with a U.S. security guarantee for Israel that could include an international force on the border, including U.S. troops if requested by both parties. Now listen, in the context of what the U.S. is doing and how inept we are and things are going on and the lack of resources that we're pouring into this, you think the Israelis think the U.S. promise to put some kind of security force in the Golan means a hill of beans? Only if they're an old general. Then they might believe it. But rational people aren't going to believe it. Here's one more recommendation from it says sustainable negotiations leading to a final peace settlement. This is about Iraq. This is the Iraq Study Group, and they keep talking about Israel, Palestine, the Golan Heights, leading to a final peace settlement along the lines of President Bush's two-state solution, which would address the final status issues of borders, settlements, Jerusalem, the right of return, and the end of the conflict. That's really what, look, the secular guys recognized 10 years ago, we got to, this thing in Israel, this Israel thing is the pivot point. It sounds a little bit like what Bible prophecy teachers have been talking about for a long time, that it is the pivot point to this final problem in the end times. I'm almost done. So the ISG recommended withdrawing U.S. forces. I'm going to skip over this a little bit. Bush decided not to follow the reports, and he did do the surge, and it was successful for a while. But listen, she says this, but now we see that through Rhodes, the Iraq Study Group's recommendation became the blueprint for a new U.S. strategy of retreat and Iranian ascendants in Iraq and throughout the Middle East. This is a brilliant analysis of what happened. So where did Rhodes get all this? Well, he took the notes, he's adopted it, Obama liked it, and now it's U.S. foreign policy. And it came from the Bush administration study group. The chief components of that strategy have already been implemented. The U.S. withdrawal from Iraq in 2011 left Iran as the new power broker in the country. The nuclear pact with Iran facilitated Iran's transformation into the regional hegemon. Against the strategic shift, the U.S. minimalist campaigns in Iraq and Syria against ISIS makes sense. The U.S. forces aren't there to defeat ISIS, but to conceal Iran's rise. I think this is right. Look, Persia, Iran has been around for a long, long time. It is very difficult to take over. In this picture, this is the Caspian Sea that you see looking to the north. On the inside of these mountain regions is the city of Tehran. Iran is essentially, geopolitical strategists will tell you, is essentially a fortress country. It is surrounded by mountains that are almost impossible for armies of any size to penetrate. So it's going to be an existing power in the region, whether we like it or not. That's the sad fact. And I will only say is that, as I said, in Ezekiel chapter 38, it identifies Persia, and that is the one of all those countries that you can say that's the one that's going to be involved in this invasion of Israel in the end times. It is. So Caroline continues. Gives to me 2 more minutes. When ISIS is defeated in Anbar and in Raqqa in Syria, its forces are liable to turn west to Jordan. The U.S. is currently helping Jordan to complete a border fence along its border with Iraq. But even then, ISIS is already active in Jordan. If events in Iraq and Syria are any guide, where ISIS leads, Iran will follow. Iran's strategic aim, as well as America's, requires Israel to become a strategic player. We must recognize that what is happening in Iraq is connected to what is happening here. We need to understand the implications of the working alliance Obama has built with Iran. Even if Obama's successor disavows his actions, by the time Obama leaves office, America's options will be more limited than ever before. Without war, his successor will be likely be unable to stem Iran's rise on the ruins of the Arab state system. In this view, in this new strategic environment, Israel must stop viewing Gaza, Judea, and Samaria, the Golan Heights, and Lebanon as standalone battlefields. We must not be taken in by regional peace plans that would curtail our maneuver room. And we must bear in mind that these new conditions as we negotiate a new U.S. military assistance package. Even if Obama disavows his actions, by the time Obama leaves office, America's options will be more limited than ever before. Without war, I'm sorry, I already read that one. Listen to this. The name of the game today is chess, she concludes. The entire Middle East is one great board. When a pawn moves in Gaza, it affects the queen in Tehran. And when a knight moves in Fallujah, it threatens the queen in Jerusalem. This is a brilliant analysis. You got to read it through it a couple times just so you can, because I think it really helps put in place what's going on. Now, we have the benefit of the prophetic scriptures to let us understand how these players all play. But I'm just saying is, this is really unprecedented, the way this is all coming together. So take that to heart. And don't be discouraged. This will all play out as God's thing. Look, I concluded my thing on Jan's program with this. A lot of times in Bible prophecy, and I'm guilty of this too, we look at it as, what am I going to get out of it? Okay, how does this affect me? I think we all need to sort of reorient ourselves to, how does the fulfillment of all this glorify God? That ought to be our goal. Let's pray. Father, thanks again for letting us know what's going on. Bless us as we go this week. Lord, give us resolute minds and hearts that we will be able to stand against these things that are going on in our culture and geopolitics in the world. And that we'll understand that this is all working out according to your perfect plan so that you may be glorified. In Jesus' name, amen.